Okay, can I bring everybody back together again? Thank you very much for just sharing with each other for a little bit. We're just going to invite our panel who have been listening in the same way that you have to what they've heard, but they're from Liverpool, so we're going to just hear what they have to say, and Hetty is going to be the first one to make an intervention.
Thank you very much. I think it's interesting that this seminar series is called Cities of Inspiration, and it was certainly an inspirational sort of overview of Hamburg. In terms of coming at it from a Liverpool perspective, whilst I thought it was absolutely fantastic and it was really interesting to hear, I saw, you can see some of the comparators, but you can also see some of the big differences between the two cities and why that is the challenge. There was a discussion on the tangible and intangible elements of the different definitions. And just a quick reflection on, the Liverpool's World Heritage status represents the early development of global trading and cultural connections throughout the British Empire, in comparison to Hamburg's, which is consequences of the rapid growth of international trade and high quality designs and functional construction. Now, high quality designs and functional construction is fantastic, but that's not in our World Heritage status sort of definition, and that's one of the problems I see us as having. There's differences as well with the buffer zone, with the very tight buffer zone in Hamburg, and the reasons for that as well, whereas Liverpool's buffer zone is quite large, and we have those issues to contend with. So whilst it's very interesting, and obviously this is sort of how Hamburg and the inspiration we can get from that, it is really good. But some of those comparisons worry me as to how we go forwards as Liverpool. The big things, of course, being the ownership status. So in Liverpool, we really have a problem with the fact that the vast majority of our World Heritage sites has a multitude of owners, and it's not Liverpool City Council. And also, I don't know German planning laws, I have to admit, but I suspect they are stricter and more, and national government has more influence over them than currently we can rely on from our government. So what I'd like to see in terms of inspiration is more control over our World Heritage sites and the buildings we can do. Ownership would be fantastic, but I think there needs to be some recognition of the difference between the two in terms of the tangible and intangible elements of our different status sort of definitions. And with that, I think I'll move on. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. Peter Jones. First thing, no one's mentioned Kevin Keegan. I think he was probably our greatest export, wasn't he, to Hamburg? But just a few quick points, really. I think, firstly, I think these seminars are fantastic because it's a great way of learning from other cities and how they deal with some of the challenges which are very similar to what we're facing in Liverpool. I think sometimes in the city we are guilty, given that, I mean, it's quite ironic actually, the fact that we're supposed to be an outward-facing city, and yet often we don't learn lessons from how well other cities are dealing with those challenges. So all three, Strasbourg, Hamburg and Bordeaux, obviously it's great to hear. But I think Hetty makes a good point there, really. That whilst there are similarities, I think there are quite important differences between Hamburg and Liverpool in terms of the World Heritage Site. It's very evident that your World Heritage Site is quite tightly defined, and you're dealing with some historic warehouse district, whereas in Liverpool it's a completely different complexion, and we've got the challenge of trying to balance the regeneration of that area at the same time trying to preserve the historic value of it. I mean, I work in the regeneration department, and it was really envious to be where you've got a city and you've got actually an urban preservation department which works alongside the town planning, and maybe that just sort of, you know, is a reflection on how we're able to approach things in Liverpool. But I think what was really interesting looking at some of those slides is that there's a lot of similarities. They were very reminiscent for me for some of the areas that we're dealing with in Liverpool waters in particular, having to sort of regenerate a dock environment. Havant City is often quoted as a really good example of how well that you've managed to deal with that process. And I think it was great to see that what you've got there is some really modern buildings and really quality architecture, which can happen alongside and without spoiling the heritage and the historic value of the place. And I think that's something that we need to be looking forward to. We are working, I'm sure Pete's going to mention it, how on a master plan with Peel, which is looking to try and achieve that, and trying to establish, and we are very early on in that process, but what are the ingredients of a successful place, and how can you build on what is special about the place, and how we're all very, very, very conscious of, we've got fantastic opportunity. It's not even a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, it's not a generational thing, because potentially what we do now is going to be here for forever. So it's really important. We're all very aware that we've got a huge responsibility to get that right. And then I think my final point, Jerry, will be is, and I'm really interested to hear how you've engaged with UNESCO, and you mentioned ICOMOS and the World Heritage Centre, and I think we're very keen to open up a more constructive dialogue with them as we move forward, so that as partners and through with the likes of Engage and so on, that the City Council and all of the stakeholders and everyone's interested in the site is make sure that we work together to achieve the same aim, because I think actually we've got, but I think we've got a lot more in common, and I think there's a lot of shared ambitions there which we're trying to achieve. So I'll pass to Pete.
Thank you. What I would say is that the Liverpool Waters team are, I don't know how many other people in the room have been to see Hartford City, but we are kind of veterans of two very recent visits, and those visits came from meeting Dirk Schubert when he first came to the city a while ago, and it's always been a case that Hartford City's been one of the precedent projects in Liverpool Waters' development, and that's not just, and actually not because of its relationship with World Heritage, but actually how it's dealt with a lot of practical issues like flooding and design codes and car parking and all the sort of nuts and bolts. I think one of the things that was quite a surprise to, I know Anna from my team's in the room as well, was how Hartford City and the World Heritage Site sit cheek by jowl with each other, but people haven't been afraid of two things that I think we're afraid of. One, boldness, and two, height. Now, I would argue that if you go to Hartford City, you'll see that there's a building that we nicknamed The Finger that's right on the edge of the World Heritage Site and isn't great. But actually, there are also other buildings of scale which work incredibly well, and perhaps one building that I'm quite keen to see come to life, which is David Chipperfield's building in the southern part of the Hartford City Master Plan, which is about 60 stories. You know, what's really interesting for me is the fact that it isn't a binary conversation. That height, you know, Liverpool is a city of height and scale, and Hamburg is a city of height and scale. Now, the things that define them are perhaps different. You know, in Hamburg, it's very clear that all the church spires are the things that pop their heads above a datum level and allow you to navigate and work out where you are. But the thing that perhaps brings us back together again is the point about quality. And you know, there's an interesting conversation that will go on about ownership, but actually ownership's only one dimension. The other dimension, perhaps the most important dimension, is the one of quality, is that it doesn't mean that one side, i.e. the public sector, carries great value in ownership and the private sector doesn't. It's very much a case of how do we work with UNESCO and ICOMOS actually being the difficult party in all of these conversations, to understand what quality looks like. You know, and I think the great thing about Hartford City and what we heard from Dirk Schubert when he came over all those years ago is they weren't afraid to admit when they made a few mistakes. And I guess the question is, we probably don't want to make any mistakes, but it's quite good to learn from everybody else's. So on that note, pass back to the planning officer.
Okay. Thank you very much. Keen to jump in. But I'm saying not for the time being. This is your opportunity, and if there's time, we will come back to the point we want to make about the new development that Peter mentioned in Hartford City. Sorry, I can't speak through the microphone. We have a policy, those of you who've been to previous seminars, that we have a gender balance agreement that a woman will always have the opportunity to speak. If the first speaker is a man, the next one must be a woman, and we'll wait for that to happen. So please bear with us. You also need to speak through the microphone, and Graham's going to be rushing around doing that.
Hi, I'm John Hinchliffe. Thank you very much. Very interesting projects. You certainly have some very impressive and significant warehouses in the Spiekerstadt. Almost as impressive as the tobacco warehouse at Stanley Dock, but I am a little bit biased on that front. Now, you did touch upon the City Hof project, and I understand, kind of went over it fairly quickly. I believe there is, though, quite considerable public opposition to the proposed demolition of the 4 monumental modernist buildings, and such it was that opposition that it's generated that mission from UNESCO and ICOMOS. Now, we've had 2 missions from ICOMOS UNESCO, one in 2006 for Man Island, which turned out well. They said the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site was not under threat. But then we had one in 2011 regarding the Liverpool Waters proposal, and that has caused some problems which are ongoing and resulted in Liverpool's World Heritage Site being put on the list of World Heritage in danger. So I'm wondering really, going back to the query, how you're getting on with UNESCO and ICOMOS, and whether you've had a report yet from that mission, and really how you resolve public opposition, certainly big differences of opinion about kind of major development proposals.
That's a very good question. We've had some private talks about ICOMOS and UNESCO, and I think it'd be good to hear how they get on.
Overall, we tried to involve ICOMOS and an external expertise in beforehand of the project. I'm myself member of the ICOMOS monitoring in Germany, so I'm an ICOMOS member, and there is a huge discussion about the historic value of the building, but that's not concern of the World Heritage in our point of view. This is now as well discussed with UNESCO on an advisory mission level, which is still different to the reactive monitoring. Now we're getting into the fine tuning of the World Heritage Convention, but actually we asked for that mission to discuss with ICOMOS. So it's not an official mission sent by somebody, but it's the town that asked for an additional advice, and we still have not the report in. So we don't, at the moment, we don't know what UNESCO will say, because this is, of course, ICOMOS is only an advice giver to UNESCO, and it will be the UNESCO World Heritage Center, and at the end, the World Heritage Committee or the panel that will decide on what next steps are taken. But I hope we are far away from anything in danger listing or even state of conservation reporting to go before, because we are in a phase where we are still on the academic discussion or experts exchange on what should happen. And I think if you look here, where you have a core zone where ICOMOS was okay to let go defined views of the World Heritage nomination to no doubtly have quality buildings between the Albert Dock and the buildings that Three Graces here, but it's a defined view, and there they let go. And in other cases, not only for Hamburg, they go on the vistas of several places that were never defined or discussed or in contents decided in a nomination. It's difficult of different steps of methodology and level applied, and we have to try also as ICOMOS member to get one level of evaluation so that we always have the same answer and that we know what we are getting into it, because we have a defined contract. The nomination dossier is a contract that the state party signed with the world community, and it's quite clearly laid out what the rules are, and that's, I think, one of the advantages, or what maybe Hamburg learned from a lot of other cities that nominated before, is that it was very well defined in terms of what is the World Heritage, and maybe close, so it's also easy to deal with.
Thank you. Question from a woman. And we'll wait until there is. Oh, back row. Can you rush through the corner there to get to the back row? Okay.
Hello. If locally Liverpool Council and planners and developers know what the constraints of being a World Heritage Site is before they start planning anything, why is that not the basis from where they look at what they need to do? And it may be wonderful to have imagination to build a 60-story building, but inevitably it may not happen, so why not be a bit more realistic in what is possible to happen instead of kind of coming up with ideas that
Okay, if I can, the question seems to be around that we know what the regulations are, what the guidelines are. Why are we proposing things that are going to cause trouble? Is that what you're... Yeah, Peter, would you like to start?
Sure. I think it's important to note that I mean, the World Heritage Site is of the highest level of protection in heritage terms, but heritage isn't the only issue that the council has to consider. So you have to balance a lot of different issues when you're making a decision, and that's enshrined in not just in a local policy, but in the national planning regulations as well. So I think it's not a question of it's the be all and end all, so that's it, the door's shut. I think it's a question of trying to work within what the World Heritage Site brings to the site, and then develop the scheme from that basis, and try and make sure it's integral to the how the scheme evolves.
Anybody else like to answer from
I just make one small thing as well. It's not Liverpool proposing these plans, it's not the council. It's the council responding to an application submitted to them. So like we were discussing before about regarding the ownership and that. So in terms of, I think you're really referring to the Peel Ports part of the scheme. That's, Liverpool City Council isn't thinking, what can we do there? Liverpool City Council is responding to an application submitted by a third party. I think it's not Liverpool not being realistic. That's what's happening with that.
Okay, that might not have answered it exactly as you wanted, but we'll leave it there for the time being. Anybody else want to ask a question? On the back row over there. Can you just wait for the microphone, then everybody can hear, please. Thank you.
I know you were talking about the heritage site, but you've got a lot more history than Liverpool. I wonder if in any sense you're sort of neglecting that. I mean, even King's Lynn, that's a minor port on the east coast, has a couple of Hanse warehouses or Hanse warehouses. Do you have anything like that, which I would regard as more heritage-worthy than a few blocks of offices and 19th century warehouses? Sorry.
There are the heritage law from 2013 put 10,000 objects under protection within the borders of Hamburg. So we have 10,000 listed.
Official of 7,000.
Yes, well, that's depending whom you ask. Huh? Okay, and funnily, the oldest is from the 14th century. Is a lighthouse tower in the Wattensee, but the buildings from the Hanse, I don't know, Christoph, on the buildings of town, they are not part of the story we tell with the World Heritage. They are part of the other heritage stories that are told in Hamburg with all the other buildings. But like I said, we really focused, at that point I was not there. The people that proposed the nomination for World Heritage really focused on a very specific type, two monofunctional areas of the town, and not overall town history or other parts that are told. For example, Hanse is very much told by the World Heritage Cities of Bremen, Wismar, Lübeck.
But in Hamburg was a large fire in 1842, and there are not in the inner town of Hamburg not many old buildings remained. For instance, in 1895 was a cholera epidemic, and then much buildings were pulled down because they had the idea that the bad influence of the old houses and the density and so on. That's why they pulled them down, and they erected then the Kontorhausviertel, the office buildings. So it was, I think, this was the reason for the that they want to use the ground with much more to earn more money. But the official version is the other. Okay, and and after then was in 1943 to 1945, where 80% of the inner town was demolished, and so not many old buildings remained. Only the large churches were rebuilt, and the warehouse town, and so this is not World Heritage, the other things, but there are 7,000 listed buildings, and these are 16,000 house numbers. That's why it's a discussion. Okay.
Okay, I hope that's a start of an answer. A woman, please, to ask the next question. Yep, over here, please.
Hi, I think Hetty quite rightly mentioned that the World Heritage status probably for Hamburg and for Liverpool isn't just about buildings. It's about rapid change and the rapid change of the economy at that time and how that's reflected. What do we think the challenges are for cities in an ever rapid changing economy now to ensure that what we build going forward we get the investment for, and what we build going forward is positive and good at the same time as being able to respect our heritage and culture?
It's a really good question. Can we start in Liverpool? Pete, can I ask you to take?
I think Hetty also raised a point about those intangible assets, and one of the things that we've been wrestling with when we've been talking to UNESCO is the fact that a big part of Liverpool's inscription and the thing that makes it Liverpool are those intangible elements, the edginess and the internationalism and the bustle and the noisiness and the smell of the docks and all those things that Rob Burns over there has got a wry smile on his face because he's schooled me well, him and John Hinchcliffe. But I think I've completely forgotten the thread of the question, so remind me and then I'll get back onto it. Is that you can proceed at haste and repent at your leisure, and I think one of the things that we've got now here in Liverpool is a real resurgence in interest in the city and development, and one of the things that a lot of people have been saying, particularly in the great social media, is why isn't more happening? And I think Pete Jones and I would probably stand shoulder to shoulder to say that in moving forward, the most important time in a project the scale of Liverpool Waters is in the planning. So because you plan all those things that then bear fruit later on in the process, and not to forget this is a 32-year plan, is that this isn't Shanghai, so you won't see 700 cranes on the skyline the day after tomorrow. So the honest answer is time and care and attention, and that there is a very positive and fruitful dialogue that is going on between Peel, Historic England, the City Council and UNESCO at the moment, which will hopefully bear fruit to those things. And one of the key things, and what this seminar does greatly, is allow people to look out. In other words, you know, when there was a comment levelled at me last week about, well, why have you been to Hamburg when you know you should be looking at Liverpool because all the greatest buildings in the world are in Liverpool? That's very true, but you know, this is a city of internationalism. You know, this is the city that did the first thing, then exported it, then brought it back, whether that's the tall building or the dock network or what have you. So I think the fact is that at the moment we're in a phase of careful reflection and not a case of just chuck it up fast. And the thing about Halfon City is that it's been very long in the making, but once projects of scale get a momentum, then that's when they really are going out. I went to Halfon City twice in 6 months and saw quite a rapid change in 6 months. And I think, in a way, the dialogue that's gone on post-planning for this project in particular is probably more important than the dialogue that went on up to planning. So I would certainly say to everybody in the room that the opportunities are not lost. It's never too late to get into dialogue and work together. And I genuinely don't think that there are barriers and hurdles to overcome because it happens to be in a single ownership in a private body. You know, the Stanley Tobacco Warehouse is in a single ownership in a private body, and I think we all agree they're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think the question was alluding to sort of that what I was referring to earlier about that balancing the special interest in the site and also the need to attract investment. And I think there's been a lot of transformational development. We were very fortunate to have Grosvenor, and they've transformed the city centre along with the arena. But I think that a lot of criticism is the focus has been on the city centre. I think what people tend to forget is that, and we are talking a lot about Liverpool Waters, but I think that's where the area of probably the highest concern, certainly within the UNESCO, is. But Liverpool Waters has the potential to reinvigorate some of the most deprived wards in the whole of the city, and I think we shouldn't forget that. A large part of the World Heritage Site isn't accessible to the public at the moment, hasn't been for generations, so I think it's really important that, yes, we don't forget what's special about the quality of the place, and we try and weave that into any development through the work that Planet are doing on the Liverpool Waters Master Plan. But I think if it's right, if it's done properly, then it could have a massive transformational benefit for that part of the city, which is really important.
I'll just be very brief because I don't want to repeat points, but it absolutely is that, and it's the time and the care and the collaboration, as was just said. The city will change. The city will change in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. It's not. I think we need to be careful about saying this is the only thing that will ever be on this site, because it won't be, and actually we need to be realistic about that. So it's making sure that we don't put anything too short-sighted there, but also that we're there ready for adaptation in the future as well. And that is, it comes from collaboration and it comes from carefulness.
Okay, I think we'll give you a rest for a moment. Anybody else want to ask a question? Yep, front row.
Hi, I just wondered about public opinion in Hamburg to the changes, or well, the status, I suppose. I thought it was quite interesting that you said that they voted no against the Olympic bid, and I just wondered why that was, and was it to do with change and regeneration, or, well, yeah, I just was interested about public opinion to the status in Hamburg.
I think we don't agree, we both don't agree on why it did not work out, the public vote. So there was.
I heard the row this afternoon. They had a row about exactly that question.
So for the Olympic, I mean, I wasn't in Hamburg at that time, so I give him the priority.
But I think it was. Excuse me, but I didn't really understand your question. That's why. So why? Why? Okay. I think it was not only because the reason was not because they were afraid of large buildings and so on, but about the lot of money which would be used for this. And there was a project of the Elbphilharmonie, you know. It was planned with 70 million euros, and the costs were then 700 million euros for the town of Hamburg. And this was the one. And then you know about the Berlin airport, and they thought about this, and then about the Olympic Society and so on. And on the other hand side was the workers in the port. I showed you that they also said, okay, this is impossible. There are our jobs in this area, and where should they be translocated? It's impossible. And I think this was the mixture of many reasons. Okay.
And in terms of World Heritage projects or projects that we have, and what we do is, for example, for the advisory mission, quite often advisory missions happen between the experts of ICOMOS and the City Council. We invited NGOs to participate and to make their standpoint of view, to transport them as well to the ICOMOS experts, to have a whole picture. Because we do not want, as a town as well, that it's said it's only one-sided. We want all the sides all the parties being heard. Of course, there was a restriction in numbers, because otherwise the experts would have stayed for 3 weeks. If we invite all the experts, it would have to say something on the heritage value of this and that building. But I think everybody, or every position was heard, and I think that worked out quite very well. There are as well in the planning processes of planning documents, there are public hearings in Hamburg, and actually there is changing as well with the new chief architect that it's in Hamburg, that is very much more keen on developing public participation in terms of beforehand on what we do. And we, for example, we work as well on a heritage development plan for the Konterhaus district, because we have quite detailed regulation for the warehouse district, but for the office district we do not really have a heritage plan, and we're working on this. And there, of course, it's foreseen that also the public is invited, and how would you see this area in the future. And of course, for example, at the moment there are a lot of parking spaces, and the changing of the city and reacting to new developments. What will happen then when actually the city wants to try to push out the cars and the vehicles of the town? What happens to this heritage area where it was actually built for the cars at that time in the 1920s? How do we deal with that in terms of from a heritage point of view? And that will be discussed in a more public forum, and what people will do. So there is a public participation, but I believe that we have there as well, together with World Heritage, where it's one of the 5 Cs, we have to learn or do more about it as well. And I congratulate Engage Liverpool actually to bring together civic society and for all the discussions to happen.
Thank you. It's very generous. Thank you. Another question. Second row, Miriam.
Thank you. And I'm quite pleased you just talk about the fact that you tried to push out cars, because I was a bit not disappointed, but the 2 precedent seminars show how the city used World Heritage status to develop the city in a way innovative and move forward in a way that they treat public spaces and bring back nature in the city, and public transport, and all this kind of, well, let's say, well-being place within the city, high quality, because you talk about high quality building, which is really important, but high quality public spaces is as well important.
There is, with the nomination file, there was a development plan for the Speicherstadt submitted that treats exactly with these areas, and the town is currently developing the cycling routes and everything. I did not mention it because there were a different focus, but that exists as well. But it's less the World Heritage that is used for the urban regeneration as the town overall, as the inner town concept, that with the Hafen City, actually it's more the Hafen City, the driver, that was there, because the master plan of the Hafen City completely changes the way routes run through the town. It's not the World Heritage in that sense. It's the whole city development to the Hafen City that changes the use of the town and the cycling roads, and that there is more electricity and more electrical for electric cars and so on.
I think that they couldn't show this. It depends also on the relatively small size of the World Heritage Site, because then it would be useful to show the whole city and what is being done there. So it was not our task here. Okay.
I think that's one of the things if I can try and add a little bit to that I've learned, is the difference. I hadn't realized how extensive Liverpool's World Heritage Site was until I met the guys from Hamburg. And the comparison with a very tight, very specific, which is actually quite a small part of their city, compared to Liverpool's, which isn't just the waterfront. People think it's just the waterfront, but it's a huge swathe of the commercial district, moving by the Town Hall, Dale Street, Victoria Street, right the way up to the Culture Quarter, St George's Hall, those buildings around there, and then another sector in rope walks, and they're not really very well connected. It's a very, as we've been saying here from the panel, it's a very different thing. And I think what I took from Bordeaux and Strasbourg was very much the placemaking, the beautiful way they've brought life and green life into the city, caring for the environment and public spaces. And we have that challenge. That's one of the challenges which I think the questioner over here was raising for us about what challenges do we have? How do we make our city more environmentally friendly? How do we do more placemaking? Because the people who built our city were not thinking about placemaking. They were thinking about using every spare inch of ground to make money from the commerce of the port. And that's why we do, unlike Manchester, we don't have squares, public squares. Other cities have a lot, we don't. So we've got issues. I mean, that's one of our challenges, but we've tried to answer that question. Another question over here. Can you just wait for the microphone, please?
Great presentation, Weaver. Thanks very much. In terms of paying for the infrastructure, you know, around the heritage site developments, how do you, is that acquired federally through your, is it through taxation, or how do you work with developers? Because it's a bit different, isn't it, from in England?
Yes, there's the possibility for private owners that they get tax-free for their investment. They can reduce the tax every I can explain exactly, but I think it's not useful. All in all, in 12 years, 90% they can reduce their tax by the costs of the investment. That's possible. And we have also a small money to also to give to owners have problems to realize the projects in their own houses. But it's only a year we have only 1 million euros. It is not so much, but it's much more what they can save if they can save the tax. That's possible.
That was, I'm originally from Austria, and for me that was a big difference in the heritage law in Germany overall. I met a lot of people that actually invested in historic buildings because they said, well, there is a huge return of investment because they're able to de-tax the works that they put into the housing, and that's a very good opportunity in Germany.
One last question, and it needs to be a woman, I'm afraid. Sorry there, Ian. Is there a woman who'd like to ask the last question? Going. Can we give the microphone to the lady just to say thank you? It's lovely.
Thank you. No, I would just like to say thank you very much for a very detailed talk, and I think we've probably all gone away with a lot more knowledge about Hamburg than we did when we came in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words. No. We'll finish. Ian, have you got... Oh, well, we have had a lady, so go on. Yep. Ian's last question.
Am I allowed? Thank you. Jerry, you mentioned Liverpool's more than just the waterfront, but it is an important part. And I just wanted to ask how Haven City specifically has dealt with the waterfront. And we have a vast amount of waterfront in Liverpool, but the difficulty is connecting to it, as in the people, the public realm connecting to it, and it's not just about sometimes the weather, it is about the infrastructure there and the public realm getting to the water. Has Haven City dealt with that? Can you connect to the water? And more specifically probably is with the flood risk. How have you dealt with the flood risk in Haven City while still creating an enhanced area of public realm that people can use?
Okay, in terms of flooding, actually there is 3 times of a year the warehouse district, well, at least since I'm in Hamburg, is underwater, so it's a completely normal issue. The tide, of course, it's quite far away from the seaside, so the tide we had in earlier times, there was a tide difference of 1.5 meters, now it's about close to 3 meters, so that's getting up because they're stretching the Elbe River to have bigger container ships coming up to the harbor. It's also different, I think, in terms of the waterfront, and the connection is because it actually was before the warehouse district was built, it was much more part of the town historically, and it now becomes a part of the town. It reconnects, and we will see how the Hafen City works out in the future in terms of this, and I think this is still not really solved. But one more thing about the flooding and the warehouse district, because I think it's a quite interesting detail. It's for this reason we can't have housing in the warehouse district, and so there the normal building regulation saves a use of the warehouses as lofts or selling out of these buildings, because, well, it's because of the fire department can't go to the houses to save the people, so that these parts still will be commercially used.
And the first new buildings in the Hafen City had their own flood protection. The first housing building, residential areas which have been built, and now it changed, and now every land is gets 4 meters higher than, and then only is being built there. So this is the flood protection what is realized there.
Actually, if you look at the plan, you would see that the warehouse district goes down and then it goes up again to the Hafen City because they built it up, so to be above the flooding.
And I think access is a different question. One of the things they've seen in Liverpool is the wall right the way along the waterfront, and that's caused us to have a major barrier, which is a challenge, whereas they haven't got the same experience in Hafen City. I'm going to say thank you very much. Just want to, this is our final seminar in the series, and there's a few thank yous, starting with yourselves. Thank you very much, particularly those who've come to all three, and I recognize an awful lot of people have been at every one of the seminars, and that's really encouraging, because we want to try and build up a picture of what's available and to try and find inspiration from the different places. We couldn't have done this without our sponsors. It would have been impossible, and we haven't yet worked out the final costs of our series. We're hoping it comes within the boundaries of the money we've managed to raise. So thank you for the contribution you've made. And we will publish on our website as soon as we have the details of where the costs have gone and what it's been doing. Very grateful to RS Clare, Brock Carmichael, and there's a number of people here, particularly John Cassell. I've seen John somewhere around on the front row. Thank you very much. To Planet and Pete Swift, who is on the panel tonight, and the City Council have been generous as well in helping us out. Want to thank the venue here tonight, that's the name of this place, and the Royal Lava building. And Non-Conform, Rachel, who's on the front row, for all the work that they've done. And our caterers, I do swear by Bean Catering, I think they're fantastic. Liverpool organisation started with a small place on the docks and have now grown quite big, so we're delighted to work with them. And Joe and Craig for videoing and live streaming, thank you very much. Everything we have filmed will go on our website as soon as Joe gets his finger out and delivers it to us, and we'll let you all know when we've published all the videos. But they will come, and they are on the way. I want to thank the Engage board. This isn't a one-person show, so everyone who's taken up, particularly Zerino's been magnificent. He seems to have disappeared, probably outside, ready to... Oh, at the very back. Thank you, Zerino, and Alan's been a wonderful chauffeur, and the other people have been really helpful. And our panelists tonight, Hetty, Peter, and Pete, and our two speakers, of course, Bernd and Christoph. And we have a little gift for you in your place there, a little memorial of Liverpool. And just a couple of notices before we draw it to a close. Some of you will be aware that Everton Football Club are about to launch a public consultation about the proposed Bramley Moor Dock Stadium. And of course, they want to get as much support as they can from the city. When we hosted the UNESCO speakers last year, they made it clear that if this was to come forward in the way it's been proposed, it would be the end of Liverpool being a World Heritage Site for two main reasons. And the first reason is it's not only the dock wall, the dock basin that's listed as part of UNESCO, but it's also the water itself, the water space, to see the vast expanse. And the second reason was the legibility of the site, that you have to, in future generations, come to the site and understand what was there, see what was there, get a feel for what was there. So we'll have to wait and see what the proposals are. Nobody knows. But I just think it's important that everyone, whatever your view is, that you take part in the consultation process. There'll be a lot of opportunities in the city centre in Liverpool 1, and we would just want to encourage you to take part in that and encourage other people to take part in the process that they're engaging in. Also, Engage publishes a newsletter which Zarina is the editor of, called Grapevine. We hope you receive it. That's the way we try and keep in touch with all the things. There's a big consultation going on that we're promoting at the moment on the Isle of Man ferry. We'd like you to take part in that, and all the details, again, are on our website. And also, we've published a fantastic fly-through on the website of the proposed cruise liner terminal. And that's really interesting to have a look at that. So all those kind of things. I've got a developer I'm meeting tomorrow who wants to hold a consultation process further down in the South Docks area. And again, all the details about that we will publish and let people know. So you must sign up to our Grapevine newsletter. If you have any problems with it, Zarino's the guy to talk to. And then no one is leaving tonight. I know it's Halloween. You're not getting out alive until you've filled in our evaluation sheet. This is really important for us because we need to give, if we're going to seek more funding, we need to be able to evidence what you think of the work we do, and we need a postcode where you're from so we can trace where people have attended the seminars from. So thank you very much to all of you. Can I ask a big round of applause for our two speakers and our panelists? So thank you, everybody. Thank you.